I can hire one half of the working class to kill the other half.
For fuck's sake.
That was a quote, obviously not spoken, by Jay Gould, a railroad magnate, and obviously a very down-to-earth, cool person. Welcome to part 2 of work, a topic that will no doubt deserve more attention in the near and distant future here on the FFS Talk podcast, recorded here in Las Vegas, home of the service industry and origin of all tips as the language of gratitude notions, the modern day versions. On August 18, 2021, welcome to yet another episode. So part 1, we talked a little bit about the sort of work that I'm usually in, possibly you are, the cubicle workers, the people that are able or were able during this pandemic and are in general able to work from home or basically have a little bit more agency than some other job roles. The future of work for people like me and you, if you are in that group, might include remote work from anywhere, part-time work from home. There have been a couple of articles coming out now about people who have taken maximal advantage of the work from home concept and have had multiple jobs simultaneously, which is, of course, what I myself advocated in the part 1 episode. That is, work for yourself and have multiple clients. That's completely acceptable. Doing it as an employee of multiple companies where they don't know that you are doing this maybe is ethically problematic. But the idea, I suppose, if you are able to maintain productivity, to deliver on responsibilities, to get the job done, as they say, then one would need to argue, as long as there's no conflict of interest, as in you're not working for McDonald's and Burger King or Intel and AMD, or if you're not working for multiple companies doing the same or overlapping tasks, sharing information between them and so on, that would be a problem. But as long as you are not doing that, behaving like a normal modern day professional, then who knows? Who knows? Maybe that is completely viable. And certainly the stories suggest that it is lucrative. Certainly, like having multiple podcasts, podcast shows, you can make tons and tons of money. Or not. By the way, you can hear my voice is labored as always, more so even more so now with the smoke. That was the weather forecast for Las Vegas on I think it was the 17th. Smoke. We are enjoying diminished air quality thanks to fires, and it has a rather drastic effect on my voice and my sinuses. It's mostly a sinus reaction. And hopefully you can't hear that banging outside. All sorts of factors aligning to make a fine episode today. But it's interesting, the part 2 of the show, this episode today, we're looking at the other part of the working population. That's probably oversimplifying to say there's 2, but service industry, frontline healthcare workers, and today, firefighters who are fearlessly coughing their way through who knows how many tremendous, gigantic, dangerous, damaging, life-altering fires, burning a lot of them in California, but in various places, not only in the United States, but elsewhere. I saw a headline, I think this morning, almost numb to them at this point, that the firefighters are fighting a fire that is larger I think it's in California, but I don't recall. But that changes all the time anyway. So the fire is larger than all other fires combined, and fires are larger than previous years, and so on. So these are all sort of facts of life, but it does raise the same sort of question for those fighting the fires. And by the way, some of those people fighting the fires are prisoners doing time, not always for, awful, they're not awful people by any means. A friend of mine was in for 2 years for a traffic fatality. He going to work in the morning, driving into the sun, didn't see a approaching motorcyclist, made a left turn without yielding. 2 years of time for a vehicular manslaughter, I think it was. So he was fighting fires up in northern Nevada, California areas, and I believe in California now you are able to get a job as a firefighter after acquiring all that experience. There was a time, and this may be true in other states, where you, because you were in jail, in this case a felony, you would be ineligible to be a firefighter, despite the fact that you were paid, $2 a day or some ridiculous, I don't know what it is exactly, but, drastically underpaid and risking life and limb for the privilege of fighting fires that is taken away from you on release. So put firefighters on the front lines of fighting fires in the same group of working people. And you'll note I'm putting frontline medical, especially during pandemic, all the people that were literally risking the lives of themselves and coworkers and family, going home without knowing exactly what the fomite transmission situation was. There were anecdotes of people, living in a motorhome in their driveway or a separate entrance and separate rooms and staying away from their family for months at a time. An abundance of caution. Frontline medical workers often are not making the big crazy dollars. Not everyone is raking in elective surgery, like plastic surgeon money. So I'm only laughing because I've known some medical nurses and EMT folks, and they are not breaking the bank. So they're doing this thankless job. There were certainly enough reports during the 2020, the heyday of our pandemic travails, where there were not enough medical supplies, not enough personal protective equipment, and not enough beds, certainly. So total chaos, total mayhem, a ticker tape parade, and appreciation. Probably, I'm going to guess 9 out of 10, or maybe 10 out of 10, would have taken adequate supplies, adequate shift relief so that they could take time off, adequate medical resources. Would have been a better way to say thank you than a parade. Maybe. I can't speak for them, but that's my sense. And then you got your fast food, your grocery store clerks and stockers. You got your people delivering. I know here in Las Vegas, there were obviously closures. There was a limitation on the number of businesses that could accept walk-in, retail customers. Grocery stores were basically the main. You had people, I will say anecdotally, where I am located, my local grocery store appeared fairly early, I'm going to say April 2020, with one confirmed case of COVID-19. So here we had almost certainly a stocker, somebody stocking shelves at a grocery store. Who knows the early days of contact tracing, so who knows for sure who, how, where, when. And the lax reporting made finding that information difficult for the general public, much less coworkers there. So we have, how many times people in meatpacking and other farm and food production facilities and any of the frontline essential services workers who are maybe making minimum wage, not in too different a boat, maybe on a different deck of the same boat as the frontline medical people driving emergency vehicles, EMTs driving ambulances and whatnot, retrieving patients, those suffering the worst cases, those in the emergency rooms, those doing intake for patients and trying to keep people separated between potential COVID and people just going to the hospital for other things. And then I mentioned the firefighters. So, and that's, I'm not giving a comprehensive list here, but the world got turned upside down a little bit, and we sort of discovered the essential worker is doing essential work, but is not making essential money, as in enough to get by, enough to justify their risking of life, health, wellness of not only themselves, but their family, their colleagues, being in close proximity to sick people during the pandemic lockdown times, or the certainly mitigation measures, people ignoring them, people being near each other for extended period of time seems to increase the risk of transmission. So these are the people that, when discussions about minimum wage or health care, people that were on the front lines who are, for whatever reason, not eligible for or not entitled to, that's not me saying that, not able to get proper health care. There are anecdotes from, this last week tonight, I believe I was watching that, John Oliver on HBO. I think he was interviewing some EMTs that said they could not actually afford health care for themselves. So people that were on the front lines are not properly insured against work-related injuries. I guess I don't even know how that would work if you catch a virus in the course of doing your job. Is that a workman's comp thing? Don't know. So add to all of this the fact that the thing that motivates people like Andrew Yang to discuss the possibilities of UBI and the need for revamping the way people receive some sort of universally basic income, some way of surviving in the current economy. You start looking at things like workplace automation and how certainly enough has been written and said about the Amazon warehouse scenarios and how robots are automating away some of those jobs. Eventually, delivery jobs might be automated away. Truckers driving cross-country routes, moving merchandise and produce and other things here and there might lose their distance hauls to automation. Certainly not tomorrow, but truck driving is a huge industry, and it's one perhaps on the precipice of automation impact. Certainly grocery stores, even the notion of self-checkers and automated shopper for pickup or delivery possible. So self-checkout is now a thing already. So when the automation that's found in a warehouse, the pick and pack, I don't know if that's what it's called, but if robotics can fill an order from an Amazon warehouse, then certainly nobody at Amazon, through the Whole Foods purchase, the Amazon Go, nobody is thinking about displacing minimum wage workers with automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, customer recognition, right? Fast food, certainly, screen ordering, automated kitchens, firefighters. Perhaps firefighting robots will come around, or maybe we'll just rely more and more on underpaying incarcerated individuals to do these jobs. So the future of work or the present really of work for what's a good word for this full spectrum? It's not the restaurant workers, and certainly here in Las Vegas, the service industry, like I said, is one of the core foundational roles that people fill. The tourist industry doesn't yet depend on robotics. It depends on bartenders and front of house at a restaurant, or concierge and bell desk and customer service and housekeeping. And I've actually been in a hotel where they had one of those robots that comes to your room with some sort of, say you ordered you say you ordered some towels. Like, hey, I need a couple more towels up here. Then a robot comes up to your room on wheels. It's basically I don't know. I want to say it was like maybe 3 feet, maybe 1 meter tall, maybe less. And you get some sort of a noise at your door, and you open it, and there's a cover on the top that opens, and some sort of here is your towel or whatever. Right? Very weird. Not ready for prime time, to be sure. But when you do examine now, so in part one, we talked about how there are these workplace paradigm shifts. There are things like holacracy, leveling or flattening the organizational structure, empowering the employees. There was the alliance, which is another way of empowering employees and making the workplace, employer-employee relationship and set of tasks and responsibilities and ongoing post-employment responsibilities and relationships a little bit more structured and explicit. Or you just have, working from home. And you have companies like Google now being explicit about pay reductions for those who want to work from anywhere, whether it's a home down the street from a Google facility or around the world. So an interesting way of retaining employees, although I did read that was a potential stealth layoff technique. It could be, attrition. It's another form of attrition, I suppose. There's my voice going. So in the frontline worker or the on the ground or the I don't want to say, well, there's skilled labor, there's retail, there's medical, there are all these sorts of jobs that require, though, that you be on site, right? You can certainly be a doctor and take Zoom calls and offer some sort of online consultation, but where the rubber meets the road is where the scalpel meets the flesh, or where the stethoscope reaches a surface of a body to listen in on their circulation, or where a syringe needs to go into an arm. The list goes on and on there. So whether you're serving someone food or selling it to them, or building a house, or processing food, or packaging items in a warehouse, or delivering items, these are jobs that you cannot do at your work from home standing desk. And when you read about workplace paradigms, these are the people that are often left out, or these are the jobs that are left out. I don't even know if people are considered in that equation. How little can we pay to get the maximum output between now and when the job is automated away to increase our profit margin, right? Robots don't need healthcare. They don't need to take breaks. They don't all the Terminator bullet items, no pun. right? It doesn't sleep, doesn't negotiate. It will not stop until your package is delivered, to paraphrase. So the future of work for these types of jobs, there are some serious questions that need to be asked. And I think I have been in a meeting room with someone who was proposing, workplace job replacing robotics. And the pitch was probably well-meaning, although remarkably short-sighted. It was about returning quality of life to workers, less need to work in a dangerous or fatiguing or non-rewarding job. Maybe it's a robot that's working the front counter at a McDonald's. Maybe it's moving boxes, industrial athletics, I think. Is that the term? Moving packages around in a warehouse, fighting a fire, and so on. So there's this notion that people are eager to stop doing these jobs, but any modern day read about robotics and AI and the effect that these will have on most workplaces over time, certainly some workplaces sooner than others. There seems to be this notion that people have entered the world and then they are counted, right? So how many people will lose jobs and how many people will need retraining and how many people will do some other job that does not exist yet? And that is the argument that most of the time through history, when there's been a workplace evolution, that the job market and the marketplace in general adapts and it evolves with the workplace changes. I believe the more common one is mass production, any sort of industrial revolution time frame. You can look at horses and cars, like what happens when technology replaces an existing paradigm. What happens to the thing, the people, the animals, whatever that were doing the job before. Industrial revolution revolutionized factories and producing things, and the agricultural revolution, how food is grown and distributed. And so all these revolutions allegedly represent the evolution of a job marketplace and the nature of employment and what people need to do in society, what they can do to make a living and participate in the economy and all these things. So the question is, are we, much as you can say about humans on Earth in general, are we out evolving our capacity to respond to that evolution, right? So if and when there is if I were to walk into the grocery store right now and a robot was stocking shelves and another robot was preparing foods at a food preparation, like there's at the store I go to, there's like a sushi bar type thing. I think you can order particular items, or that it's sort of packing up pre-made but made there meals. You buy a sashimi, $10. So the person is doing that. Or maybe you have a question at the cheese counter, or maybe you have a question at the bakery. Whatever's in your grocery store today. Could these be addressed by robots, by automation, by machinery? Does the person need to be located in the store? Is this a job that could be done from home? Here in Vegas, there are Creech and Nellis Air Force bases. They are certainly operating drones around the world from bases like those here. So what's to prevent a still human interaction at a retail frontline essential worker position in a grocery store or a restaurant or wherever, a liquor store here in Vegas, essential. So what's to prevent possibly some robot, some automation to be maybe managed by fewer employees remotely in places where pay can be reduced, cost of living adjustments down. Right, or a grocery store in Silicon Valley could have employees based in, pick a place, somewhere in the Midwest, where, well, basically anywhere that's not California or New York, or even here, where cost of living is going up. So you take employees that can work for less and still have a reasonable quality of life, and you enable them with distance working, coupled with like a hybrid automation model. And then what do you end up with? You end up with an automated store with humans, fewer humans interacting at a distance, granted safely from home, but fewer people doing in-person work, which is just more and more steps towards no people doing in-person or even the distance work, right? As more and more automation gives way to AI-controlled automation, the parts that will be missing will be the human caregiving, emotional, humorous, joking. Somewhere in Vegas, there's a bar that has a bar robot that will mix drinks all day. But if you're going to a bar for bartender flair versus, well, I mean, anybody can do that. But part of the experience, the ambiance of a bar or a restaurant or anywhere really is the human interaction. And so, and that's true as well in medical. Those frontline workers, there's the human factor that goes into caregiving, not only when things are going well, but maybe perhaps even more so when they are not. Can these things be automated away? I knew one person specifically who was doing OBGYN work with a robot. She would be in a different room operating the robot, the surgical robot, which I likened to a, there's a droid in the A New Hope Star Wars movie. One of the droids that is in the Jawa vehicle. It has a lot of arms sticking up. It looks like a pincushion with robot arms. So I said, does this robot thing look something like this? And she kind of sighed and she said, oh, it's not too far off. So she could conduct an entire pelvic procedure in a different room. Now, granted, she was on site, but eventually that will move off site. So frontline medical workers could be interacting with patients through a some sort of a telepresence. They already have telepresence robots that run around on little mini Segways with a little tablet screen. So as more and more of these things are enabling distance and remote work, perhaps someday our frontline essential workers will be in similar shoes as those of us who are more able today to work from home or work remotely, the so-called knowledge workers. And again, I'm not saying that any of these people are not knowledgeable, but it's a gross division between people who can do all their work from the beach on a laptop or a cell phone even, or a tablet, and people who must be, you can't, well, for the longest time you were not able to build a home remotely, although now robots are doing that. 3D printed homes are becoming a thing. But yeah, they're just you could grossly separate jobs into those that can be performed virtually or remotely, and those that can be performed only either on-site or with some sort of a direct connection. So like I can attend a Zoom meeting or some alternative to Zoom and conduct 99% of my task some meetings, some code reviews, some design ideation, blue sky sprint meetings, all these things. Teaching from home, we know that there are some issues with human contact and interaction for kids, but mechanically, learning from home is okay. So some aspects of teaching might be considered frontline work. We are certainly today, here in August of 2021, as schools become a focal point for potential transmission of the Delta variant. No one would argue that teachers aren't frontline workers in that context, and students are, if they're compelled to be in the classroom, are not in too different a boat, to use the same boat reference. So how do you enable that sort of job role and, by extension, the student role in that interaction? So these are interesting times. So part one, we touched on my suggestion was, which is certainly open to debate, hint. My suggestion was that the working from home concept, if we decouple healthcare, health insurance, health maintenance plans, all that, from employer, if we enable healthcare to be more easily accessed by individual self-employed persons, then if the notion of, say, a non-disclosure agreement or confidentiality agreements or other work responsibility, statement of work in a contract, an attachment to a general work agreement, these are all things that exist today. So if an individual could take on a job role with an employer at a distance, conduct their job, deliver on their responsibilities, on their expected output, and still be entitled to the traditional employer items. I know as an employee versus contract, back in the day in Silicon Valley, the employees could attend a party or receive some sort of a workplace bonus, a party being some form of compensation. So employee perks had to be differentiated from contractor perks. So you can't go to this event, you can't enter this building, you have limited access and things. So there's a differentiation between employer and contractor. If these sorts of things could be much more explicitly broken down into people who must be employees, and the Alliance had the foundational versus transactional versus, I believe it was rotational tours of duty. So if you're a foundational employee, if you are a founder, if you're core technology, if you're, the C-suite, if you are on the critical path for the operation of the company, then certainly it makes sense to have employees. But if you are a programmer, member of technical staff, if you are accounts payable, accounts receivable, any of the knowledge work that is not particularly tied to the particular company that you are working for, if I can say particularly one more time. So when you have tasks that could be performed, and this is where automation will come in too. If your accounts payable robot can be in constant communication with your accounts receivable robot and your payroll robot, then you don't need different departments and different spreadsheets and different, these things will be automated away. So the notion that some of your workforce could be external on a contract basis or corp to corp, these are not new notions. So whether there's a team or if you want to go with a family, which is probably a broken paradigm, but a team, loyal employee base. Often that loyalty cannot be two-way, so that's one of the things to consider. But if we look at the frontline service, essential workers, could that be done in a similar way? If these jobs are at risk of being automated away, or if they can be done remotely, does it make sense to have a human that can work remotely doing the jobs through perhaps some sort of on-site robotics or automation to oversee not only like a on-the-ground operation, like say you have a firefighting robot with a human controlling them, not in the robot, but remotely, then you could possibly save lives or reduce risks to humans if some of your firefighting force is robotic. The robots don't necessarily have to be completely autonomous. They could do basic, and certainly Mars rovers have taught us a great deal about this. They can do your basic navigation and obstacle avoidance and object recognition and obviously heat vision, heat detection vision, not Superman's version of heat vision. But certainly robotic firefighters out in a forest or moving through towns as towns fall to these huge fires. Robots can enter fire without fear, without danger, can locate survivors, can extract them. And there can be humans, much like the drones we were talking about earlier. Humans can be interacting directly. A human could interact with a person on the ground. You know, hello, this robot is being controlled by a human. My name is John. We're here to get you out of this fire. You know, human interaction is totally possible. And the human interaction could be done in parallel with the whatever autonomous function is on board for the robot. So there could be this hybrid direction. I'm just throwing some ideas around here. But these things are possible and arguably possible today. So what happens then to work if someone gets the bright idea that restaurant work, that, and this is being done today, by the way, shortage of workers available for service industry is leading to more automation in restaurants, in bars, in retail. So I'm not even talking about, you know, decades. I'm talking about months and years. What do we do when fewer people are needed to work? And that is, again, the basis of the UBI discussion. And anyone who is keeping track of things like Copilot and I think Codex from the GPT-3 realm, these are, you know, automated software development tools that probably aren't quite ready for prime time. If I had to be honest, I would say automation should be tackling testing first. Write me a billion test cases automatically based on the code base, and then we'll talk about generating code. That's just an idea. If you want to work on that with me, give me an email. dhugo@ffstalk.com. So what happens, though, when we start removing these workers from the workplace? Do we create new jobs? Do we provide UBI? And when I say we, I mean society, right? So there are a number of people who, well, first of all, you can receive special training and be in those medical frontline roles, and we need those. Those are not going away tomorrow. You may be in high school or recent college, or maybe you just need a job and you are working in fast food or customer service or some service industry role. Or maybe you're in the skilled trades and you're doing plumbing, carpentry. You know, the lists go on and on. I always say 0% of the people on this planet have decided that they wanted to be on this planet, right? Your parents had this conversation. They didn't include you. So you are placed, however you specifically arrived, you are placed in this, the mess that we call Earth through no fault of your own. And the economy so often assumes that, well, that's your problem. I would argue that turning the backs on, especially this, everyone we're talking about in part two, if we simply automate their jobs away without considering the humans that held those jobs, we are on a slippery slope, if I can use a logical fallacy reference, to nothing good. Certainly the Morlocks will be waiting. Something to think about. So what works and what doesn't? What can we do? What can we think about? What can we talk about on this podcast moving forward when it comes to the future and perhaps the present of work? Part 3, I will almost certainly talk about some blue sky. But for now, if you are listening and you're thinking, if you're listening to this voice, I thank you for your patience. It's about to give out, so bear with me. We're coming in for a landing. But what would you do, especially if you yourself are a retail worker, frontline in the pandemic context, but generally speaking, if you are, whether you knew it before or not, if you're an essential worker, making too little money, if you have decided on a career change and you were able to do so, or if you're able to hold out, if you're able to be a part of this sudden, long-awaited realization that, 30 years of wage stagnation needs to change. If you're wondering how an economy where workforce is being replaced without the jobs being replaced, what does that mean for the economy? Who's going to buy stuff? If we're shifting all of our automation and AI and technology to production, who does consumption if money is still the go-between? So, what works and what doesn't? Frankly, to be honest, I think the reason I was bringing up the nobody asked to be here, you are left to your own devices in an economy that is shifting away from you. And that might even be all of the cubicle workers who are able to work remotely. Well, maybe your coding and your accounting and your all these, the notion of being self-employed in your own consultancy on the beach or on a jet, going off to parts unknown, traveling and working, work from anywhere. When jobs are replaced, when workers are replaced and jobs are not, then it won't really much matter if you are a software engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, a cook at McDonald's. By the way, I used to work at McDonald's when I was in high school, so that comes to mind first, but it's not the only one, obviously. When robots are stocking the grocery store and bringing food out to your self-driving car, and you're not even in the car, and the groceries are brought to your home and a robot is stocking your refrigerator, at some point you, as a human, are merely consuming. And then if you're depending on money, how do you make that money? So I have to think that what's not working here is the horizon view where all this stuff sort of comes to a head when minimum wage increases drive this desire to increase margins, to keep more of the money which is valued by the productivity of, say, America or your country, if we stop having a useful society and we are production only, somebody has to buy the stuff. And if the stuff starts coming from other places, how does our GDP function? If it's always GNP. So, personally, my opinion, what does not work is the lack of foresight, the hand waving, the dependence on the notion of some form of capital injection, whether it's UBI or whether it's they call it a negative income tax, or whether it's I don't even know. There are many possibilities, but at the end of the day, when the number of consumers goes to maybe approaches zero, and all of our advancements are on the production side, what happens next? And I think the signs are pointing to some of these frontline workers being early in that learning experience. What's going to happen? So that's part 2 for the moment. This topic will, like most of the topic arcs that are finding themselves on the so far up until now solo FFS Talk podcast, they are certainly seeds of future discussion, which I hope we will have. There is my current push, which is not automated enough, is to get the ffstalk.com website up and running, to migrate away from the Substack and review newsletters, to self-host, self-publish, and to hopefully draw some people with ideas and a desire to share them into the discussion. And you might be just one of those people. So do not hesitate to reach out. Join at ffstalk.com. Drop an email. If you would like to listen to our podcast on Anchor at the moment, it's it's anchor.fm/ffstalk. If you'd like to listen to our Substack, if you'd like to read or subscribe to the Substack newsletter, the show notes newsletter, which I always want to verify before I mention it, so that's what I'm doing at the moment. The Substack newsletter is the show notes, which can get emailed to you. It's kind of a lazy way of publishing show notes, I have to say, because they're not hosted in a context that can be manipulated. They appear in the show notes newsletter archives on Substack, but that's not ideal. But for the moment, ffstalk.substack.com for the show notes. If you prefer to receive a link to shows in an email, that's the way to go. To be honest, this is a great example of automating away jobs, right? So the act of contacting people who are interested in things was one of the early things to go in the web revolution, right? Cold calling and other forms of engagement, composing email blasts, all these things, constant contact and MailChimp later and all these tools can very easily give way to automated newsletter construction. And how does the customer want to be reached? Do you want to subscribe to an RSS feed, a newsletter via email? Do you want to receive a message on your social media messenger platform, a DM? So these are all maybe in the part 1 discussion, but either way, we are a part of that. So you can subscribe to the Substack newsletter for now, ffstalk.substack.com. I don't believe anybody is listening to or reading. I don't think there was an audio version of the weekend edition So that may or may not have a future, or ideally all of this will be folded into the equivalent of a blog with our topic arcs and our connections to individual podcasts that don't have to be only podcasts. So the evolution of how to engage people who want to participate in these discussions, whether it's spoken, audio, or written, if it's going to be live streamed or whatever. So these are all enough experimenting with newsletters and services like Anchor. These will move to second tier or may not stick around. We'll see. But self-publishing, self-hosting, and self-determinism are the names of the games. If we're going to be automated away, it should be on our terms, right? So on that note, I will thank you for listening. Do tell your friends. Do share links, emails, newsletters. And don't forget, we will eventually be completely self-hosted publishing and engaging. And we would invite you to participate 100%. If you're already there, great. Come on, be in an episode where we talk about social media engagement today and what it should be tomorrow. How about that? My voice is giving out. I thank you for your patience. This has been the FFS Talk Podcast on Work, Part 2. Thank you.